one of the things, I had my very first interview today on the book, and I was asked the question, what is it that's unique, or how is the Christian story different from all other stories that try to explain the world? There are a lot of stories that try to explain the world. These are what worldviews are. They're views of the world. They're views of reality. They're takes on the way the world actually is. And since these various worldviews compete with each other, that means they disagree with each other on critical points, they can't all be true. It's not bigotry. That's just simple math. It might be that my story is not true, but I have a reason to believe that it is, and I actually have more than one reason to believe this. And this is the heart of this, answering this question that I was asked. What is it? How is our story different than the other stories that try to explain the world? And what I said is, I went back to this conversation I had with my daughter, who's now 12, but when she was 8, she asked me, as a believing Christian herself, Papa, why do we believe in God? How do we know God is true? And as I thought about it for a few moments, it just occurred to me, I'm thinking, how am I going to explain this? I'm the apologist, but she's 8, so how, all right, wow, it just came to me. The reason that we believe in God, honey, is because he's the best explanation for the way things are. Let me just say that again, because it's so important. He's the best explanation for the way things are. When I say the way things are, I mean when we look about at the world and we reflect on what the world is like, and the order of the world, the existence of the world, the fact that human beings seem to be different in qualitative ways from everything else. But humans are also kind of bad too, We're beautiful, but we're broken. And people sometimes say, well, look at that, God can't exist. Look at all the evil in the world. To me, the evil in the world is a reason that I believe that God exists. Now, that takes some cashing out, and I do that in the book. But the point is that we take the problem of evil seriously. Materialism, atheistic materialism, naturalism, they can't even make sense of the problem of evil. They can't get any traction in their worldview. Neither can, I think, forms of Eastern religion either, and I talk about both of those. No, we can make sense of the problem of evil. It's intelligible on our view, but we also have a solution to it. And that's what the whole story is about. It's a solution to the problem of evil. We take it head on. We don't deny it. We look at man in all of his beauty and all of his ugliness, in all of his dignity and all of his cruelty, all of his goodness and all of his brokenness. The scriptures look at the world the way it really is. And so when I think about the explanatory power of our worldview over and against the explanatory power of competing worldviews, in my mind, there is no comparison. There is no competition. It isn't that there aren't any problems with the Christian worldview. There are loose ends in every worldview. Christianity is messy because the world is messy, life is messy, knowledge is messy. And you're never going to be able to answer all the questions because we're finite creatures. And if it turns out, if God is God, then there are going to be things about him that are just going to be beyond us. And we're going to see him do things that don't make sense to us, but that doesn't mean they don't make sense. This is what we ought to expect, in fact. C.S. Lewis made this point. That if God is really God, we ought to expect there to be imponderables in who he is and the way he acts, okay? But taken as a whole, I look at Christianity compared to other worldviews, that would be religious systems or non-religious systems, taken as a whole, and there just is no comparison. The way our worldview fits with the world as we perceive it, the way it fits with our deepest intuitions about the nature of the world, is so tight. This is the classical definition of truth, by the way, that your view of the world fits the way the world actually turns out to be. And I think that other worldviews just fall short in deeply significant ways from explaining the real world. And Christianity doesn't. Christianity tells the story of reality. In fact, in the very beginning of the book, I talk about how the story is sometimes almost seems like a fairy tale. It's and then I think, wow, actually in a way that's true. That is, it's almost every tale ever written, I think, is a kind of echo of this story that's embedded deep within our hearts. But this isn't just a story. It's the story is actually true. And even though some parts of it seem wonderful and some so frightening, it's hard to imagine it can be true. When we think about it carefully, we realize deep inside that it all makes perfect sense. And that's one of the things that was so compelling to me as a young man considering Christianity. It just seemed to fit together so nicely. It just made sense to me. Not everything. I hadn't figured out all kinds of stuff before I became a Christian. I didn't know about evolution. I hadn't figured out the premarital sex deal. I didn't think about the abortion thing. There was a whole bunch of other stuff, that I was just hanging on to that were part of my old way of thinking until my mind began being renewed. But when it comes to the core things, it just made sense to me. And this is where I think the Christian story excels over all the rest. It resonates with our deepest intuitions about the way the world is.
The Christian story is like many other great stories in that it deals with the great issues all people struggle with and the great questions everyone asks. It's a story about peace shattered by rebellion, about love and betrayal, about self-sacrifice, and about redemption. All of our deepest aspirations, all of our longings, all of our hopes, and even our struggles, all of the conflicts in all of history are tied to this story. And that's a great way to and that doesn't sound like systematic theology to me, okay? And, one thing that J.P. Moreland talks about in his book, The Kingdom Triangle, is the need for drama. And what you captured so beautifully there is the drama of the story. So yes, it's the story of reality. It captures the truth about all reality. But this is a dramatic tale that is compelling and persuasive, and the way you describe it there, it's like, I want to go see that movie, right? And
well, that's sweet. But there's one other thing hidden in there that I want to mention, and that is the last line. However I put it, this is what all the other stories are all about.
All the conflicts in all of history are all tied to the story.
They're all tied to the story. Yeah. So when people write, they write great literature, they do movies, and it's a great movie. It is great because there is something deep down inside of us that there's a memory of this big story, and it resonates with that deep down inside of us. The redemptive themes. Oh, this is a movie about redemption. Well, why is that important to people? This is a movie about coming of age or something like that. And all of these things, I think that they're appealing because there's something deep down inside of us where there is a story, eternity written in our hearts, that these other stories, artistically done, resonate with in part, but deep down inside, this is the story that all of these are about, and all the conflicts of history ultimately are about. And so because we bear the mark of God, this sets us apart from everything else, gives us infinite value. It grounds all the moral obligations we have towards each other, and it puts us in a position to have a friendship with God, which is what God created us for in the beginning.
But that's not the whole story. That's one side of the coin.
That's right, and I call that the beauty of man. So man is beautiful. Okay, Schaeffer called it the nobility, I think, or the dignity of man. But then there's something else, and of course we all know this is true. We all know that there's something special about human beings. Okay, but we also know there's something else. Like something gone wrong. We're broken, and we're not just broken like a machine is broken. We're bad. There's something evil that lurks inside of us. And then I give the accounting of how that actually took place. There's another spiritual force that tempted Adam and Eve to rebel against their Maker. And when they obeyed him, that changed everything. They broke the world. I'm going to say that again because when I stumbled across that, I thought, this is a great way of putting it. That makes sense to me. When they disobeyed God, Adam and Eve broke the world. And there are lots of consequences to that. Slavery, debt of sin, the fact that they're now caught, they're slave to Satan, they're slave to their flesh, and the king is mad. And he ought to be mad. So this brings up now the fall of man. So now he's in a big problem. So now what? And this is where God steps in to initiate a rescue plan.
And these two pieces, beautiful and broken, have that explanatory power.
Oh, yes.
That matterism and mindism don't have.
No, that's a very good point. Remember I said everybody knows that human beings are beautiful in some sense. We're special. This is why we tell our kids don't treat each other like animals. This is why we gas termites, but we're not supposed to gas Jews, all right? There's a difference, and the difference matters. We also know something's wrong. Now, this is something we know about other people, but we try to hide it about ourselves. Well, he's messed up, but I'm okay and you're so, kind of deal, or really bad. But we all know inside there's something wrong. So I'm making an appeal here in the story to things we already know about ourselves, but the story has explanatory power. It helps us to understand why it is the way it is. Okay, and that this adds persuasive quality to it.
Yeah, and it just occurred to me, we start with Jesus and sin, but you will hear skeptics or unbelievers who think their perception is that the Christian message is that humanity is bad and worthless. And I wonder if that has to do with our overemphasis on kind of the brokenness and fall of man, and not starting with God and the foundation, and right in that first chapter, made in God's image. And I think because we want to say, well, there's the brokenness certainly, which we all recognize, but there's also the beauty and the nobility and the dignity which we all recognize.
You have to look at human beings made in the image of God. Good, remarkable. But then you have to look at human beings fallen, bad. So when people say, and then with Christians, then you see redeemed. So you have these different aspects. And if people ask me, are human beings basically good or basically bad? I say, well, it kind of depends what you mean. They are made out of good stuff, but they went bad, and now the bad rules their behavior. But since they're made out of good stuff, this is something from Schaeffer, it gives us hope that we can get back to that good thing. If we were started out bad to begin with, if that was bad was our essential nature, then how are you going to change that? So this gives us hope because we know where we came from. We can go back to there if God helps us.
And there is no other worldview that offers anything like this in terms of an explanation that really a comprehensive explanation for human nature.
I agree.
And again, this is part of the apologetic value of this approach. The coherence of it and the explanatory power is very powerful apologetically.